I'm going to recommend to you one book that you really ought to read, or at least part of the book that you ought to read, which is probably the most fundamental book which has probably ever been written anywhere. Certainly, it's one which it underlies Western philosophy, Western life, Western literature, like nothing else in history. It's a kind of unique book as far as the West is concerned. Almost every strand of life has been affected by this book, and everybody knows the book, and virtually nobody has picked it up and read it. And it's certainly therefore worthwhile looking at. And it's the Bible, which is like the fundamental, one of the oldest books ever written, and yet it's one of the most neglected too. And I'd urge you to pick it up and have a look at it, if only for the history. It's got so much baggage attached to it that many people avoid it like anything, and I want you to try and avoid that. What book am I talking about? I'm talking about the Bible, comprised of the Old Testament and the New Testament, or the oldest books of literature which has ever been written. And there is probably not a single part of Western society which has not been undergirded and touched by this particular book. So what I would recommend, though, to you is don't try to read the whole thing. It's just too vast and it's too huge and too. The Bible as such is one of those books people know about. They dismiss it, but and yet it's one of the most fundamental. At least you should have some knowledge of the fundamental nature of what's within it, and you can get that, I would say, by reading two bits of it. The Bible is composed of 60, I think it's 66 books in the Bible, 39 in the New Testament, and so many others in the Old Testament. It's split up into two parts. And what I would recommend that you do, get a copy from somewhere. You can find them anywhere in old charity shops. Just read the very first book in the Bible. It's called Genesis. It's not that long. It's a very interesting book to read. It's full of the most amazing stories about the most amazing characters. It starts about the creation of the world and where the world has come from, and the creation of Adam and Eve and those kind of things. Get yourself a new translation. I don't use an old-fashioned translation. Get a modern translation. Just read that first book to orientate yourself into Western culture, to see that everything that we pick up and do has got some roots going back to that amazingly old book. It's certainly worthwhile looking at the origins of our culture and the origins, the history, and of everybody who's ever read anything will have any writer will know something about that, and draws from those archetypical stories of the bad brothers Cain and Abel, the Tower of Babel, the story of Abraham, a guy who was told to become a hero, basically to venture out and leave his parents' home, and to leave everything he knew. Rather like students, really. Leave everything you know and go and live in a place which I will direct you to, and the life which unfolds and the challenges which unfold for him at that time. It's about, I'd say, 30 odd chapters of a very first book. Just read that through. Wouldn't take you very long to read Genesis. Once you've read Genesis, forget the rest of it for the moment, unless you really get gripped by it. But just read Genesis, and then which gives you all about origins. And I know that there's a lot of controversy with it, but think of it as a story of how the world unfolds, to give you an insight into what other people have always thought from time immemorial, before the time of science. And then switch to one book in the New Testament, and I would recommend you pick up the Gospel of John. So that's about the fourth book in Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Pick up the Gospel of John. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are four books which tell the same story about the life of Jesus Christ. And John probably does it in the most interesting way. So I would definitely try and read through that particular one, and then compare the two. They're meant to be books which are companions to each other. They've been written in that kind of way. In the first line of Genesis is, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." written in Hebrew. Bereshith bara Elohim Hashemayim Haaretz, the heavens and the earth. And in the New Testament, you have a kind of correspondence to that. You've got in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So you've got in the beginning of Genesis, in the beginning in John, NRK Kai Ho Logos is how that one starts. Those two are complementary, and they're both telling you something about the start of the world and the cosmos in which we're living in. And then it goes on to talk about the character of Jesus Christ and what that's like. Now, you cannot really understand anything about the way in which our civilization, our laws, our society has been built unless you have at least some fundamental knowledge of those two basic histories. Of 2,000 years ago those books were written, and you only need to read them once to get an idea of how they have infected the life of almost every piece of literature that has been written, the Shakespearean plays which have been produced, the poetry which has been produced. I'm not even talking about religious things here. I'm talking about the way in which our whole culture has been underlined and undergirded by these mythologies of truth which are contained within them. And I would strongly recommend that, if there's one book which you probably have never read and which you obviously should read because it underlies everything, pick up a copy of a Bible, find one in an old second-hand bookshop, make sure it's a modern version, read Genesis and read John's Gospel. That will give you a real understanding of the broadness of the world and the cosmology of the world into which you live. And it will undergird, say, some give you some background understanding of Western society and the values upon which it's founded. They all basically come from that book, and you can find that the tendrils of it reaching into every aspect of human life. If only you would read it and see for yourself. Those just two elements of the whole thing. One from the Old Testament, one from the New. Strongly recommended again as one of the foundational texts which you really must get to grips with and you must read.